Ontiveros hit out at DOH Chief Francisco Duque, saying the issue is not about which agency is the most exhausted, but more on accountability.
We don't want to play God. We are assuming, and my colleagues can bear me out on this kung they agree with this, we are assuming that COVID respects no boundaries, respects nobody. Kung madaanan mo, tempo ka, lalo na itong mga bagong variant.
COA should also consider that we're not operating under normal circumstances. We're operating under a state of public health emergency. Hindi kami makaharap sa mga tao dahil lahat, ang dami-daming sinasabi, ang dami-daming paratang. Wala pa rin akong tulog. Ilang gabi na po ito. Kasi this is really unfair, unjust.
The Senate is planning to look into the procurement of at least 10 million COVID-19 doses that are still on hold by the national government. Is this part of the issue of pandemic funds use currently under question? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin Ed Lingao of One News. Later on, we'll be joined by Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Bok, good evening.
Good evening. Happy Hump Day.
Bok, wala pa rin tayong balita. Parang between the national government, IATF, and the LGUs, wala pa rin tayong recommendation on what happens after August 20.
It normally does come on the last day before I'd say D-Day, before deadline day. So they'll probably have a meeting tomorrow. So yun. I suppose po ang big question is di ba? Remember what we were told last night by Professor David na we might hit 16,000 next week. That's higher. That'll be our highest
ever.
Yeah, kasi nung April 2, we were only at 15,310. So with that projection in mind, I'm trying to imagine lang how they will decide tomorrow on whether to loosen or not.
Kasi in the meantime, on the other side of it, the private sector is saying, look, at the very least, give us some lead time. You know, kung ano yung mangyayari, kung mag-i-extend, we want to know how we're going to prepare. Anyway, these are something that we'll get to later in the second part of our program. For now, we will take some time to talk about something other than COVID, for that matter, something other than the Philippines. We want to talk about something that all of us have also been monitoring. We want to talk about Afghanistan. And now joining us, Mr. Ernie Wijanko, who has years of experience working for the UN Environment Program in Afghanistan. He was a consultant there working on natural resources policy development. Among other things, that means he's worked a lot of years in rural areas with Afghans, with Afghan communities. We want to learn more about Afghanistan. Ernie Wijanko, welcome to The Chiefs.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Mr. Wijanko.
Ito, si Ed, madalas din yan nag-Afghanistan. He's covered Afghanistan a number of times also. But Ernie, let's start with this. Tell us about the country. Wag muna natin pag-usapan yung Taliban. Wag muna natin pag-usapan yung US decision and what people have been seeing on social media. Let's start with the basics. What can you tell Filipinos about Afghanistan and about the Afghan people?
Sorry, can you...
Ernie, can you hear us?
Well,
okay.
Afghanistan, yes, clear. Afghanistan is a melting pot of races. You have the Pashtun tribes, the Hazaras of the highlands, the Tajiks, Uzbeks, and so you'll really see blonde people, Chinois with green eyes, and then really the Uzbeks are also there. So it's a melting pot of races, in fact. Per region, very distinct in yung geographic distribution nila. So the national language is Dari, but some people call it Pashto, which is a older version of Farsi, no? The Iranian language. And then you have the Tajiks. They also have their own language up north. More on the western side, you will have the Uzbeks, And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, in the highlands, you have the Hazaras. Then there is a smattering of small tribes like Gurdwaras. And, my hunch pa nga, Alexander the Great married Roxanne, uh, 500 years ago. My hunch was Roxanne was a Gurdwara. That's on the northeast side, bordering almost Pakistan.
So Ernie, diverse talaga, no? A diverse society. But what does that mean in terms of living there? And what does that mean in terms of them living together? When you say it's a melting pot, is it a society na nagkakasundo-sundo sila? Or is it a melting pot in the sense that they embrace that diversity?
Well, in times of conflict, like the Afghan-British War, nagkakasundo-sundo sila, But really, it's tribalism. It's fractious. In fact, it's good that in the last 20 years there was the Afghan constitution, which is all-inclusive in the sense. So the last 20 years was really an opportunity to, I guess, bring them together, so to speak. In that constitution, the women were really recognized, In fact, the first woman governors from Bamiyan, the head of the education department is a lady also. But, and may undertones then. Of course, you have the big sects in the Islam religion. You have the Shia and then the Sunnis. The Sunnis, basically, these are the Talibs, the Talibans. The Shias are what I would call the religious crescent on the east side, Iran, once Baghdad, Iraq. They were all Shias, On the western side, you have the Sunnis, so you have the Arabs, So, but then, my friends were really, they were from both sides, When you do policy development, you don't have any distinction on those things. Yeah.
Sir, kasi everybody, I suppose at this point, everybody's getting a crash course in Afghanistan. And well, a lot of the information that's coming in, of course, come from the usual sources. What I want to ask you is this: from your viewpoint, what has been lacking in the narrative that people have been getting about Afghanistan? Kumbaga, ano yung sa tingin ninyo na hindi na pag-uusapan ito pero importante ito? Hindi ito nababanggit pero importante ito. What are we missing out on when it comes to Afghanistan's story?
Well, let's take the events of the last 2 or 3 days. There's peaceful negotiations in Doha. These are the elder Talibs, They're really religious academics, But on the ground, especially the military arm, is headed by a young fellow, a 30-year-old fellow. That's the son of Mullah Omar. Mullah Omar is the founder of the Taliban, as you know. So, merong disjunct, At the same time, there's a peaceful, trying to get a peaceful settlement in Doha. Pero hindi naman nasusunod because of the younger Talibs,
Yeah, you have the theoreticians in Doha, and then you have the people on the ground in the villages.
Yes, of course, yes. Then you have the recent press briefing ng Talibs, which is all-inclusive now, The women and all will be entitled to go to school, and the government workers will work and all that. But it's not. It's a different story in the far-flung villages. The reason I say, there's been 3 regimes, or I think 4, where they tried to revolve self-governance down to the village level, Kasi the villages talaga is very different from the rural areas, the urban areas. So yan ang hindi maintindihan din ng, I think, a lot of people,
Mr. Wijanko, today, today the Taliban, I mean, since yesterday pa actually, the Taliban has started to, hold press conferences. They've been holding forums, and they've been trying to put a more moderate face. I mean, by any measure, it is a relatively much more moderate face than what we saw, 2 decades ago. And among other things, they've been paying, at the very least, lip service to media freedom. They've been paying lip service to, don't worry, we will allow women to study, we will allow them to work. But from what and of course, there's a lot of skepticism. On the other hand, people want to see, well, let's see, maybe they learned their lesson also from being outcast in the international community. But from what you have seen, is that something that the Taliban is in fact capable of, that they do have that side to be more moderate?
Well, they're very concerned with their international image. That's why all this press briefing and all that. But it's very different in the ground. The recent news I received was in some of the rural areas, the religious head was actually asking the local head to provide a list of women under 15 years old and widows at 45, and they're supposed to be married to the fighters and brought to Waziristan, which is in Pakistan, to be re-educated. So on the ground, it's different. The press briefing is different. No?
Ernie, we have with us Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
Evening po.
Good evening.
Late po. Nagpunta na rin po ako dyan sa Afghanistan. Well, the question now on everybody's mind is the speed by which the Afghan government collapsed. And there were many years of building capabilities, governance capabilities in Afghanistan. Ano po ba sa tingin nyo ang explanation? Why did it fall so fast? I mean, I'm sure the international community would not have left. Well, of course, they said there's never a good time to leave Afghanistan, pero they're saying, well, of course, they believe na kahit papano, the government would have been strong enough to withstand any immediate takeover of Taliban. Bakit kaya nagkaganon? Humina yung institution building. What happened na?
Well, corruption, the people have been skeptical about the civil government even 10 years ago. Corruption, very prevalent. Then, there's still factions of the Khans, the warlords, who actually will make deals. The same thing happened when the Taliban took over in 1995 up to 97. There was a lot of dealings with individual warlords, Ismail Khan,
Sir. Actually, sir, same with 2001.
Yun nga, nasayang lang.
In 21. But,
Go ahead, sir.
I think when you have several decades of war, institutional building, whether it's 20 years or 40 years, it's not easy, Yun, mahirap talaga. The elite force, the special forces, is only 1,000. That's the O3 unit. That's the go-to unit, Parang strike force yan ng military. And they've been fighting not just in the last few days, they've been fighting for several months now. Pagod na rin sila, In fact, from what I know, they were told to pack up and together with whoever, they went to the airport, left all their equipment and flew to one of the neighboring countries. So, but there's still going to be resistance. The Panjshir Valley has never been infiltrated by the Talibans. Ahmad Shah Massoud's son is still there. That's the first vice president is with him. They're holed up there. They're going to form resistance. And then in Bamiyan, the Taliban may be wary of really entering the highlands, the Bamiyan group. That's the Shia group, which is also That's where, the images of the Buddha being
Yes,
exploded.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Ernie, I mean,
Yes.
Mr. Villaco, the whole world is, of course, also putting focus on the U.S. and what's being framed, I think, inevitably as a failure on the part of the U.S. But one of the things that the U.S. is claiming as a positive outcome is they're saying, well, at least we went in there to make sure that Afghanistan does not become a haven for terrorism, does not become a base for terrorism. But since 2001, practically every major terrorist group in the world somehow traces itself all the way back to Al-Qaeda, all the way back to Afghanistan. How do you view Afghanistan as a haven for not just for civil war in the country, but as a haven for international terrorism? And how might we feel that here in our region?
It's very different. When the Mujahideen, when the Soviets finally left, there was no single enemy, so to speak. So many of the groups like Abu Sayyaf had nothing to do now in the Philippines, so they just export the jihad all over. The Chechnya rebels, of course, the Bangladeshis, the Boko Haram. I don't know in this particular suit, regional impact of what's happening. One regional impact that's going to happen, of course, is the refugee problem. Greece is now saying, "Oh, we don't want to be an entry point now for refugees." No, so China is also very concerned because of the Uyghurs. No, the Uyghur rebels I think they have some connection down in Afghanistan, and they might export terrorism in that part of China. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, they're very concerned. I don't know about Pakistan. The border is so porous. I hate to comment on that relationship, though.
Dangerous ground yan, sir. Sir, anyway, sir, I think that a lot of people kasi expected, I suppose, in the last 2 decades, a lot of people expected the Afghans to show what to other countries and other people would be parang a sense of nationalism or a sense of national pride. Pero some would say that in a sense kasi, to begin with, in Afghanistan, there is no such thing as nationhood per se. You have tribes, you have clans, and you have warlords, and these are all disparate interests that sometimes unite against a common foreign enemy. But speak to us about that, in your experiences and your observations about that. Does that tie together? Tama ho ba yung ganung ano? Tama ho ba yung ganung yung ganung thinking na baka we try to impose our idea of one united country on a bunch of tribes?
Well, not our idea, but started with the Brits, no? So they tried to unite them into one group. Of course, the purpose of that was to have a buffer against Russia.
Yes, in the Great Game.
Yeah, integrating them. But historically, there were nomads. No, they were really cross borders. That's the Russian steppes and the Afghan steppes. The prairie lands. No, they were up to now. There are Kutchis who are still roaming around. So they were borderless in a sense. And during those historically past times, there would be a rendezvous, the great rendezvous of really great herders. Mga remnants ni Genghis Khan, then from the north. So there would be big rendezvous. And at that time, the big jirga, they would resolve or define pasture lands. So there were no political boundaries, no? The boundaries were governed by resources management, no? Then came the Durrani line. That was the first political division, no? dividing Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that's the first statehood. But nonetheless, there was still a lot of tribalism, no? Of course, now there's still tension between the Hazaras and the Pashtuns, no? The Hazaras control the summer pasture lands, which are beautiful pasture lands, no? And then the one below, partly the Kutchis, they're left with the lowland pasture land. So there's that tension, no? Then there's the conflict. Afghanistan is a water tower in a sense because it's a major source for many rivers. The Indus River, the Helmand River, that feeds the Amu Darya, also another one to the north. So they have problems with Iran in terms of water. No, they have problems with Tajikistan in terms of harnessing the Amu Darya River. No, so it's a conundrum. No, there's resource conflict, there's tribal conflicts, there's religious conflict.
Ernie,
Now,
yeah. Maybe,
Yes.
Ernie, you could expound a bit on the resource. Alam naman natin, both inside and when in the international arena, a lot of movements are dictated by interests as well, particularly driven by the resources. You already mentioned water, and that's an important thing that people forget, that water is an important resource, that there are wars fought for water. But what are the other resources that are important in Afghanistan that will dictate the interests of the different nations?
of course, one resource which many countries is eyeing now, there's $3 trillion worth of precious metals, no? So China wants to build a direct railroad from wherever, Beijing up to Kabul, no? That's one, no? Talagang it's highly mineralized, no? Gemstones, lapis lazuli, as you know, is very famous in Afghanistan. So that's one resource. And of course, the illicit resource now is poppy.
Okay, yes. I was going to ask you about that. Dahil with the takeover of Taliban, people are now worried that the opium trade will again flourish. Is that a valid concern considering that, Taliban is trying to burnish its image, no? And trying to look like a responsible government. Is that a valid concern about opium?
Yeah, it will not flourish because it has been flourishing.
Yes, it's actually. Yes,
The two sources of revenues ng Taliban is really
opium.
the poppy and then the gem trade. Yeah.
So that is a valid concern.
Yes, yeah, that's a valid concern.
But did the former Afghan government ever really have control over the trade?
Crack
I mean, were they able to curb it?
No, well, the pre 2007, 8, 9, it went down, no? But then it was on the rise in 2015. Some of this opium can grow in really very poor soil. Huh? So it can just about grow anywhere, and some of these areas are really inaccessible, no? So they can grow there. Now I don't know what happens, how they export it, where it goes, and all of that. But it has been a big source of money. Parang wala sa radar ng Taliban to remove that image. They're more concerned with rights for women, education, and all of that.
Ernie, on the other hand, tayo naman, coming from our side, with our resources dictating our foreign policy, our most important resource, as you know, is our people. That's what dictates our foreign policy also. On the other hand, sa Afghanistan, there's only about 100 plus Filipinos, from what we understand and have been reporting. But I guess the question is, why should Filipinos care about Afghanistan? What would you remind Filipinos na, hoy, kailangan natin bantayan yan because of what?
Well, remember, we should not forget where Abu Sayyaf, where Jan Jalani was trained, no? Sayyaf is actually one of the warlords in Wardak. Huh? So, the Cairo University is a place to recruit future fundamentalists, so to speak. No, so in that sense, we should be worried about that. No? Whether it becomes a training ground for terrorism. You know, back in the 70s, it was Syria, no, and now it's Afghanistan and northwest Pakistan.
Okay. Ernie,
Sir, one more, sir,
Okay.
if I may. Bok, sige.
Go ahead,
We
Bok.
need to
Go ahead, Bok. Sige, Bok.
I was wondering, sir, about of course, nobody really expected the U.S. to stay there forever. I mean, that's a given naman eh. You have had so many presidents trying to draw down their troop strength over the last 3 administrations. Pero in 2020, they had the Doha peace agreement with the Taliban, wherein the U.S. and the Taliban met to talk peace na hindi man lang kasama yung Afghan government. And some would say that was the start of a lot of other problems along down the line. How do you view that? How do you view what happened? The peace agreement with the Taliban, and finally, the drawdown and how it was implemented.
Well, honestly, I don't. That was just a political move of Trump and then Jared Kushner, no? Minadali nila yung proseso. In fact, it's only in the last few meetings that Abdallah, the right hand of Ahmad Shah Massoud, was involved in the peace process. But whatever peace process, like I said, the elder Afghans are different now from the young Afghans, no? And I'm just concerned it will be a flashpoint. It will maybe implode, no? The younger Talibs are very different from the elder ones, no?
Mm-hmm.
Wala yung between yung between group eh.
Walang intermediaries.
So ang feeling ko Mullah Omar, the son of Mullah Omar, he's 30. He's the military head, no? Siya yung hindi sumunod, don't enter Kabul, di ba? And the Talib negotiators in Doha were actually giving orders not to enter Kabul, but they still did, no? You see.
Okay.
So down the line, I'm just really concerned whether it will implode, go back to civil war.
I do have one final question. Naalala ko lang. Kasi one of the things that U.S. President Biden said was, look, we can't keep fighting a war that the Afghan people themselves, or at least the Afghan government, I don't know if he made a distinction, but he basically said, yung Afghans ayaw ipaglaban yung sarili nilang bansa. That's how I took it. How did you take that statement from Joe Biden, from what you understand of the Afghan people and what you know of the Afghan government, making a distinction there as well? Yeah, care to expound?
Well, I think that statement is naive, no? But then wala naman siyang plan in the future wala siyang foreign policy plan for Afghanistan, I think. So napasubo lang siya because of Trump.
Okay. Ernie Huijanco, thank you for joining us. Maraming salamat for all your insights.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat, sir. Tastakur.
Maraming salamat.
Tastakur.
We need to take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. Now joining us, Senator Mig Zubiri. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening,
Hello.
Senator.
Good evening,
sir.
good
Good
evening,
evening
Sir Robbie and Sir Ed and Ma'am Amy. It's good to be back on your show.
Tapa, and welcome back. And of course, we have you because we're still talking about that COA report on the DOH. But before we dive into the details of that, I do wanna take it from the perspective muna of Secretary Duque. Kasi kanina naman sa lahat ng mga public appearance, kitang-kita nyo naman. And I mean this sincerely. Pagod na yung tao. He feels beleaguered. These are abnormal times. These are emergency times. But what's the fair way to look at, at everything that's going on with the DOH right now?
Well, he's correct by saying it's abnormal times. But I think it's not fair for him to say na hindi sila nakakatulog. I think the healthcare workers sa lahat ng ospital, yung mga nurses, yung mga doktor, hindi rin sila nakakatulog. Diba? I think patas lang naman sila sa pagtatrabaho. Kung hindi pa nga patas ay lugi pa. Lalo na yung hindi nakakatanggap ng kanilang SRA, Special Risk Allowance. So, of course, he had that famous meltdown yesterday that everybody saw on TV. Unfortunately, it's now become a meme for a lot of Viber groups. But today, in fairness to the good secretary, he was a bit calmer. He was more relaxed in the hearing in the Senate. At talagang tinanong namin isa-isa, ano ba itong mga issues na inilabas ng Commission on Audit. But on the onset, I'd just like to say that we are here also in support of the Commission on Audit because we believe that in order to have good governance, you need the Commission on Audit. That is a constitutional body with a mandate given by the Constitution to be the pambansang auditor ng bansa.
Yeah.
So, we have to put it in proper perspective, and we opened our statements today by saying that we need the COA. The COA is a great tool for good governance. It is a tool for many policymakers like myself who've had almost ilang budgets na dinaanan ko. Oh my goodness, 9 years in the House, 5, 6 years in the Senate, almost 15 budgets na. And every budget that we go through, gentlemen and ma'am, is our guide is usually the COA report. Kung tama po ang paggastos nila ng pondo, kung tama po ang utilization ng funds, efficient ba sila, effective ba sila, or ineffective, or may corruption involved on what particular program. So the COA report given on the DOF was an eye-opener in a way. Timing lang kasi pandemic, di ba? Hindi naman DOH lang po ang ipinalabas na COA report. Marami naman eh. There was ESDA, there was PPA. Ang dami, napakaraming agency all across the spectrum. May nilabas sila. And it is only now that we're unraveling. I'm sure the next few days may lalabas pa na COA report on another agency. Hindi lamang DOH. So they shouldn't take offense. No? That what they should do is learn from that experience and explain in the proper forum paano nagastos itong pondo, sagutin nila yung mga paratang ng COA, lalo na dito sa mga unobligated funds, mismanagement of fund transfers, procedural deficiencies, unreported donations, and,
Yes, sir.
Sagutin nila.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, the problem is that it's gone beyond the DOH and Secretary Duque already. I mean, the President himself has already told COA to stop publishing reports, and he's even told his cabinet members to ignore COA. To be fair, the President's not telling COA to stop investigating. Ang gusto ng Pangulo, wag mo munang ilabas hanggang wala pang final. How do you view that? And what could be the impact of that kind of a statement on number one, COA, number two, on governance?
Well, I was interviewed early this morning about that same question. Sabi ko, I respect the opinion of the President. Alam mo naman, si Presidente, pag galit yan, nilalabas niya, binubuhos niya yung lahat ng emotions niya sa mga salita niya. As I said, I have a father like that. My father's 81 and basically he just says what he wants to say, and he's a public servant. So minsan nakakasakit ng mga salita ang tatay ko. But I love him dearly and the people love him. So ganun ang nangyari dito kay Presidente. But I don't necessarily agree with him. In my personal opinion, again, I've said, this many times, that with due respect to the president, I've been through several administrations already, starting from the administration of President Estrada, President Loya Macapagal-Arroyo, President Noynoy Aquino, and of course now with the President Digong Duterte. We've always respected the reports of COA. Let's put it in the proper perspective. Kung wala po yung COA, disgrasya na lahat. Grabing corruption, grabing mismanagement. I'm sure it will give politicians and civil servants a free hand to do whatever they want with the people's money. It is a deterrent. The Commission on Audit is a deterrent, gentlemen and ladies, for corruption. It is a deterrent for mismanagement. It is a deterrent for mga tamad, no, na mga public servants na ayaw gumalaw. Lalabas din yan sa COA report if they had managed their agencies well or not. So it's a tool for policymakers like myself. It is a tool and a guide, particularly in the budget season. Kaya tama yung timing ng COA report. Yung COA report usually is released before the budget is submitted to Congress. Because pagdating po sa Kongreso, policymakers like myself, babasahin namin yung COA report ng Department of Agriculture, babasahin namin yung COA report ng Department of Interior and Local Governments, yung PNP, funds ng PNP, ginamit ba ng maayos? Ginamit ba itong mga pondo na to in the proper way? Was it properly utilized? So that is important. Let's put that in the proper perspective. The COA reports are needed. It is important. It is a constitutional mandate. It is a constitutional office, and the reason why it is a constitutionally created office is to be independent from people like myself, is to be independent from the cabinet secretaries, is to be independent from the judiciary. They can come up with these reports presented to the public without fear or favor. That is the Commission on Audit and all the auditing offices of all governments all around the world. Ganyan talagang setup niyan. They're independent from the government. So that's why I have my highest respects for the COA and continue the fight. I think they should continue the fight and continue. Imagine if wala po yung COA, how would have we been able to find out the corruption on the pork barrel scheme and scandal? Talagang binusisi nila. I'm talking about sa legislative lang. Ha? Sa legislative branch of government, binusisi nila to the last man, congressman and senator, to the last amount, to the last foundation, nandun yun. In the absence of that, we would have never uncovered anomalies like that.
Pero inabot siya ng 2 years. Senator, inabot ng 2 years yung COA report sa pork barrel. And speaking of perspective, ang sabi naman ng DOH, they still have 60 days daw to explain. Saka ang sinasabi ni Presidente, kulang lang naman daw ng documentation, bakit daw nilabas kagad. Yun ang sinasabi nila. And I think today the story from the DOH is, tinuturo nila yung DBM. This is speaking about the delays sa releases ng pondo for the healthcare workers. Sabi nila kasalanan niya ng DBM, di naman yung kasalanan ng DOH. Do you think may point din naman yung DOH and the President?
Well, on the point of the DOH, ibang usapan yan eh. Yung, Ma'am, what I mentioned earlier lang is the importance of COA. On this particular report given by the COA, pwede natin pagdebatihan yan on both sides on this issue. For example, tama, they're given 60 days to reply. Apparently, they're slowly replying now to the report. However, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. Tama po sinabi ng Pangulo, hindi naman ibig sabihin yung 67 billion or 70 plus billion binulsa. Yung 67 billion binulsa ng DOH. Tama po yun. Pati yung COA na mismo nagsabi na hindi naman sinasabi na talagang pinakit yung pondo. But what they pointed out was also inefficiency of government service. For example, unobligated funds, Ma'am Ami. Yung unobligated funds, ibig sabihin yun, pinondohan namin isang programa na dapat gampanan at gawin ng ahensya, hindi nila ginawa. Kasi unobligated, ibig sabihin, hindi na nilabas ang pondo. So for example, if you were supposed to buy PPEs, or you were supposed to buy high-flow oxygen tanks, or you were supposed to increase bed capacity for COVID hospitals, kung yung pondo na yan ay naiiwan at nanatili dyan at nabalik sa National Treasury, for me, that's bad. That's bad news for me. Kasi money not spent, why do we have to say that money not spent for that particular purpose is money wasted as far as I'm concerned? Because dapat yan ay ginamit for this COVID pandemic. So, ngayon lang nila binibigay sa amin in this hearing today, sinabit nila sa committee yung breakdown ng 11.8 billion ng unobligated funds. So, titignan natin yan. Pangalawa, meron po dito, management of fund transfers, 42.4 billion. Binigay sa ibang ahensya yung pondong yan. So, pagdating sa budget deliberations, ma'am, ang mangyayari dyan, tatanungin na namin sila. Ibibigay ba namin itong budget sa inyo? Kaya nyo ba itong gawin? Kasi kung hindi nyo kayang gawin, for 2022, it's what you call absorptive capacity. Can the agency absorb the funds and properly utilize it? For example, this issue on SRA, Special Risk Allowance. Imagine, ang lumabas kanina, of course, it's he said, she said. Sabi ng DOH, naibigay na namin lahat. Pero tinanong, halos lahat ng Association of Nurses kanina, they were saying, wala kaming natanggap. We're not imagining it. Hindi po kami nagsisinungaling. Wala talaga kami tinanggap. Binasa pa nga ako na hospital sa Tanawan, Batangas. The medical director there was a friend of mine, the doctor, is a young doctor. Sabi niya, sir, I'm a medical director of this hospital sa Tanawan, Batangas. Wala pa kaming natatanggap para sa aming mga nurses at healthcare workers. So, we're trying to get to the bottom of this. Talagang iniisa-isahan namin ang mga listahan na binigay ng ibibigay ng DOH sa amin. Pero ang punto dyan, kung hindi nila kaya, baka mas maganda ibigay natin sa Department of Labor yung para sa nurses. Kaysa sa
Yes, sir.
Sir, just on that point,
that might be more efficient.
just on
Kasi
that
with
point,
budget season coming up, sige po.
just on that point, because COA did go to some lengths to stress to the public na, look, when we say deficiency, we're not necessarily saying corruption, or at the very least not yet. Nobody's saying may nawala. But just on that point na sinabi ng hindi, na-release na namin, and then the nurses are saying na hindi, wala kami talagang natanggap. At this point, are you looking at it from the perspective of the money is just stuck somewhere in the bureaucracy, or in a worst case scenario, there were ghost disbursements?
No, well, I'm not sure about the ghost disbursements, but this is the sad part. Okay. Yung pondo na ibinigay po, and this is on record, the DOH last June 23, and I have the document here with me, 2021. Last June 23, last month, a month and a half ago, released 9.02 billion to the DOH to cover for the payment of special risk allowance of public and private health workers. The said funds covers the payment of SRA not exceeding 5,000 a month from December 20, 2020 to June 30, 2021. Okay. So, nakausap ko yung presidente ng Private Hospitals Association. Ang sabi niya, meron namang na-release. May 2-3 regions na-release na. But out of the 16 regions. So, marami pang hindi pa na-release. And nung tinanong ko po yan sa DOH, sabi nila, hindi, na-release na yan lahat. Lahat. And of course, meron kami mga resource persons na nagsasalita doon na sinabi, nurse kami, doktor kami, wala kami natanggap sa private institution. St. Luke's, I think the St. Luke's Union, the Employees Union, napaos na yata yung kanilang spokesperson sa kakasigaw na wala pa kaming natatanggap, and they claim NCR na bigay na lahat. So, there must be a system, there must be a fault in the system. Is it, baka hindi nila kaya. Baka hindi nila kaya i-download po ito sa lahat ng private hospitals. So we're going to look into that for the 2022 budget kasi maglalagay pa rin tayo ng special risk allowance kasi I don't see na mawawala itong pandemyang ito in the next year or two. So I think it will spill over sa 2022 lalo na sa Delta and Lambda variant. So we will see now. I was in a program earlier, nakasama ko si Dole Secretary Bello. Sabi ko, baka mas maganda, bigay natin sa DOLE kasi natatanggap naman ng laborers yung kanilang ayuda. Last week, we gave over a million families ayuda in NCR. And that was done in 1 week. And we're talking about only tens of thousands of health workers. Bakit hindi pa nila naibibigay? So, these are policy questions that we want to ask, and we've asked earlier. They are going to give us a written explanation on these transactions. So, very clear itong yung special risk allowance. And gusto ko po ilagay for the record sa lahat ng kababayan natin nanonood, lalo na sa healthcare workers. Alam nyo po, sila po ay talagang mga bayani na 24/7 nagtatrabaho para mawala na po itong pandemyang ito. Sino pa ilalagay natin dyan kapalit nila kung sila po ay magre-resign, kung sila po ay magsa-strike? I said this, hindi naman natin ma-pull out yung public school teachers at ilagay doon para imando yung hospital. Hindi naman natin pwede tanggalin yung PNP para magmando ng hospital. So, we must take care of them. We must show them, government must show them that we appreciate all their efforts, na mahal natin sila, that we care for them. And this is only a simple token. 5,000 pesos is a simple token. Pero malaking bagay na sa kanila yan. And we just found out also today, sa hearing, na yung kanilang benefits, pag nagkasakit po sila, we put benefits of 300,000 if I'm not mistaken, 100,000 pag nagkasakit, mild, may 100, 200,000 or 300,000 under Bayanihan 2, na pag sila ay nagkaroon ng severe case, at kung namatay, 1 million ang ibibigay natin. Apparently, ang dami pa palang hindi nabibigyan nitong benepisyo na ito sa mga nagkasakit at namatay na mga health workers. So, the buck has to stop somewhere, di ba, gentlemen? I mean, where does the buck stop? In other words, who will take responsibility for the non-action of these particular issues and the correction of these issues? So, with due respect to Secretary Duque, I know he's under a lot of pressure. Tumatawa na nga sa kanina. We were trying to make him we were trying to keep him in a lighter mood para masaya naman po siya. But everybody is under stress. Everybody's stressed and everybody is feeling the tension because of the COVID-19. More so, our frontline workers. So, the DOH, don't get me wrong with the DOH. Mahal ko yung DOH. You know, they're dedicated men and women. Marami akong kaibigan na regional directors. But this COA report will really be a guide for them to get better, for the department to do better in their work. Di ba, hindi pwedeng, hindi lang pwedeng business as usual. Kasi as you can see, business as usual is not working at this point in time.
Yes, sir. Sir, pero kasi nga, sir, di ba, budget season na nga eh. Di ba, the budget is going to be given, the NEP will be given to Congress already maybe in a few days. Is it fair to say na given everything you said, is it fair to say na mas maghihigpit kayo sa budget ng DOH, mas tsatsaniin ninyo, mas patinding perusa lang gagawin ninyo sa DOH budget for 2022 because of this experience? Absolutely,
Sir Ed. Pero hindi lamang sa DOH, pero sa lahat ng budgets, lalo na sa may mga COA reports. Of course, the COA reports that are favorable to the departments, hindi ganun katindi ang aming scrutiny dyan. But those that have these type of reports, talagang titignan natin. Kasi for us, it's mismanaged funds, it's inefficiency of the distribution of funds. And if I may, may overpayments of allowances, meron pang unreported donations. Ano ba yun? Sana yun. I hope all the donations are accounted for, even if they're unreported or unrecorded. Meron yung undelivered, unutilized equipment. What happened to this equipment? I hope every equipment is accounted for. Kaya, yung procedural deficiencies in procurement, ito po, let me explain. In fairness to the Department of Health, when we passed Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2, naglagay po kami ng provision dyan to exempt the Department of Health and other agencies involved in the COVID pandemic from the procurement law. Kasi tama naman sinabi ni Secretary Duque, kung Dadaan pa ng procurement law yan. Abot ng 6 na buwan yan. May bidding, may failed bidding, may repeat bidding, at kung ano-ano pa mangyayari dyan. So, napakatagal niyan. May publishing pa sa newspapers. And you know, we started the COVID pandemic March 16. That was the first lockdown. I know because I got COVID March 11. I was one of the first. Patient 142 ako. So, 142nd patient. March 16, nag-close down yung buong bansa, National ECQ. Ginawa po namin yung Bayanihan 1 para masagot itong mga katanungan, yung pondo, ayuda, tsaka yung pagbili ng mga kagamitan para sa ating mga healthcare workers. So, in a way, when it comes to procurement deficiencies and procurement deficiencies, procedural deficiencies, under the law, Bayanihan 1 and 2, we exempted. But of course, there were caveats, no? It cannot be double the price, it has to be a variant of how many percent. Di ba kasi walang bidding, so there has to be sort of like a variant in the amount. Hindi naman pwedeng double the price. So, for example, may lumabas dito na laptop worth 700,000 pesos. Diyos Mario Joseph, hindi siguro. Napakamahal naman ng laptop na yan. Di ba? There's face mask na 120 pesos. So, next meeting on Wednesday, that is August 25, ibubunyag daw nila anong brand na laptop na yan. Pero in fairness to them, hindi natuloy. Hindi na consummate yung deal na yan. Thank God. No? That's why, thank God for these reports. So, hindi natuloy yan. And then may mga face shield daw sila na 120 pesos each. Tingnan natin kung ano yung face shield niyan. Baka panggera yan. Sir Ed, yung katulad ng ginamit mo pagpunta mo ng Afghanistan, di ba? Yung para sa face shield pala, para sa ID, pang bomb explosions. Kaya tingnan natin po, baka maganda naman. So these are, as again I said, this COA report is a tool for us to make sure that the agencies run efficiently.
Senator, may insinuation kanina na the resignation of Budget Secretary Wendell Abisado might be related to this problem in the DOH, apart from, of course, his health problems. Is that an accurate perception? Is that a fair perception?
I do not know, ma'am. I haven't spoken to Secretary Abisado for a while. He's a friend. But there's so much speculation. If you ask me, madami, iba-ibang kampo, iba-ibang speculation po. So some say it's political, but the official line of all I talk to that is close to him is accordingly it is his health that is suffering. So I can only leave it at that. I don't want to speculate. But I wish him well because he's a good man.
Senator Zubiri, just one last thing on my mind. Kanina nga nabanggit nyo. I mean, it's always a teaching moment for the public, diba? Now we're learning not just about the DOH, but even the budget process. We're learning about absorptive capacity. We're learning about things where you could be deficient without necessarily being corrupt. But one of the more important things also is people are now appreciating the COA. And people are appreciating the independent bodies in particular. It just goes back to the first point where we started. President Duterte's attack and harsh words and intimidation. Let's face it, intimidation of independent bodies. Do you think Congress, do you think our leaders, you in the legislature in particular, you think you're doing enough to protect our independent bodies? Because let's face it, this is a president that has, with his pressure, threatened to slash the budget of the Commission on Human Rights. This is a president na pinagmumura yung COA and basically said, wag niyong pansinin yan. In other moments, legislators will be the one to remind us, no, what the president says is policy. And then, with all due respect to your father, I completely understand what you were saying. But in some moments naman, legislators will say, pagpasensyahan na lang natin. But for a lot of people, especially people in COA, this is not a joke. We talk about stress with the DOH. This is clearly very stressful for our independent bodies and COA. Do you think you're doing enough? Do you think our leaders are doing enough to also push back and to remind the president that, not only that this is not how you should be talking, but what you're saying is in fact damaging our institutions?
Well, I can only speak for myself. The first thing I did yesterday was to call up Chairman Aguinaldo and tell him to continue doing his job the best of his ability. That we are behind you. That there are people that truly believe in the independence of the Commission on Audit. That they are a very important agency. I've been saying this for the last 2 days. I'm sure baka magalit si Tatay Digong sa akin. You know, we're aligned with the administration, but with due respect, that's how I feel about it. I feel strongly about against corruption on government, and we need agencies like the COA to really do their job well. Kaya saludo ako sa kanila. May namatay na nga daw eh. Seri Frank, I forgot the name, but
The
I believe
author of the DOH report.
The one who wrote the
the
report.
one who signed on the DOH report was merely 39 years old. Out of sheer, I guess,
Stress.
pressure and stress, died of a heart attack.
Before naman daw, before President Paul namatay. So wala naman.
Maybe he was getting a lot of stress prior to that, but yes, siguro na-warningan na rin siya or whatever. So, kawawa naman. I mean, these are, for me, are fallen heroes. They did their job well. I salute all of them. Everyone has a job to play. Everybody has a role to play, whether we're legislators with our oversight functions. If we do our job well, then the people appreciate it, so be it. But for example, COA, then you have Civil Service Commission, you have the Human Rights Commission. Continue with their job. That's the constitutional mandate. Again, I've been through 4 administrations, 15 budgets. I've seen how these agencies really help in good governance. And so doing enough, I think, is to praise them. We have to praise these agencies and encourage them to keep doing their job. I mean, it's a democracy. Anyone can attack us. Anyone can get mad at us. But we must continue to do our mandate, things that we were elected and appointed to. And we must do it well, without fear or favor.
Okay. Senator Mig Zubiri, maraming salamat po. Always
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Sir, ingat po.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Ingat
And
po.
please stay safe. Stay
Opo.
healthy, everyone.
Kayo rin
Mabuhay
po.
God bless.
Now, before we go, another thing about another senator, Manny Pacquiao faces off against Yordenis Ugas this Sunday, August 22, and you can catch it here on Signal TV.
Stay home and stay tuned this Sunday on the much-awaited bout of the Philippines Fighting Pride, Manny Pacquiao and Cuban Olympic boxer Yordenis Ugas. You can catch their fight for the World Welterweight title on Signal Pay-Per-View for only 750 pesos. Live, commercial-free, and in HD. For postpaid subscribers, go to my.signal.tv and order online. For Signal prepaid and satellite subscribers, visit your nearest smart load retailer and load PPV 750. Don't miss this fight, Pacquiao vs. Ugas on Signal Pay-Per-View for 750 pesos. Order now.
That's on Sunday. Now, that's all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, and get vaccinated. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.